And welcome everyone to another Smart Money Circle episode. I'm Adam Sarhan. With me today is Kathryn Walker, who's the founder and CEO of Revitalist Lifestyle and Wellness. It trades in Canada, ticker symbols COM. In the US, it's RVLWF. Kathryn, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you today, and welcome to the Smart Money Circle.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Adam.
So, Katie, I always like to ask your first question is tell us a little about your journey and how you got to where you are today, please.
My journey is interesting. So I tell people a lot of times, like the universe, right? I've taken all those universal openings, and it's not like it's been a soft opening for me. It's been more of a shove. So the way I got here today, I've been a provider for about 20 years. I have 3 degrees. I'm a nurse anesthetist, so anesthesia, and then also psychiatry. So I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I created Revitalist in 2018 in Tennessee. She went public in 2021. And so I've been learning in the fire with fuel and wind on now how to be a public company CEO as well as a provider and a founder. And so that's how why I'm here today.
I love it. So, tell us about your business, please, and some of your competitive advantages.
So business aspects. So Revitalist, we're working to change the entire narrative of mental health. So she's bigger than psychedelics. She's bigger than addiction, bigger than mental health, bigger than pain, and bigger than neurodegeneration as well. So one of the beautiful things about this company, right, is we have found the golden key to all health that revolves about around the brain. So all these individual $1 trillion markets, we've actually closed all of them in because we're seeing there's one primary source that's creating all these silos. So we work with ketamine infusions in the States. We actually have a contract with the VA. So we serve veterans across the United States with that as well. We also work in the British Virgin Islands, working with some of their government officials with psychedelics. So we participate in psilocybin retreats. We also are working with AI, which is really cool. We can talk about that in a bit. And really just kind of seeing the inflammatory cascade, right? So my background being in critical care medicine, I've worked with, brains and hearts and babies, anything that you want to say. I've worked with those patients, but I've also worked with those specialists. So my communication styles, I can speak to a neurosurgeon versus an obstetrician and such. And what we're seeing is there's overlap, right? And there's overlap with all these things. And the beautiful piece is, the 20 years that I worked in the hospital system, I learned all of those communication barriers. And now we can kind of break down all these communication barriers, increasing access to where we can effectively address the mental health crisis as well as the pain crisis, not only in the United States, but across the world. So my competitive advantage is I'm a provider, I get it. And I'm also learning the business piece as well as the public company piece. And so I'm earning my stripes, Adam.
I love it. Katie, this is an awesome story. So I'm a big fan of psychology. As you know, my book was Psychological Analysis, and it was number one on Amazon for a few months after I published it. And I've been on a journey of getting to know my psyche for a long time and dealing with everything that's going on upstairs, or maybe some people say downstairs, whatever it is, but something's happening. So I love putting the pieces together. So people come to you. I know you have many different offerings. Can you speak about what a problem and then solution would be that you're working towards so the
Sure.
audience
And yeah.
understands?
So I just wrote a book just recently on the brain, how the brain
Congrats.
works more thank you, from a neuroscience data analytics perspective. So, what we're seeing, right, when people come to us, the youngest person we've actually treated was 8 years old. The oldest person we've treated is 92. We've had veterans, adolescents, people who have been divorced, domestic violence, all these different pieces. And speaking about the psychological analysis with your book, what we see and the way ketamine and psychedelics work is they act as a catalyst to really help us to improve our emotional intelligence on rapid speeds, right? So when I go to conferences, one thing I love to do, because people, they don't know if I'm crazy or if I'm smart yet. They're working on it. But I love to start off the conference and say, hey guys, I know everyone here has a very high IQ. Most of you all probably know what your IQ is, but I'm here to talk about our EQ.
Nice.
So how many people would like to tell me, what is your emotional intelligence?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, nobody knows? Right, because we're not talking about it ever. There's no scales out there that actually identify. There's one, right? One scale that passively identifies it. But these things we're not speaking about at all. So, when I see people dying from, homicide or suicide, or, all these negative traits that we have in life, right? A lot of that to me is ineffective coping mechanisms, but nobody's teaching us coping mechanisms. Nobody's teaching us not to be reactive and how instead to analyze that emotion. So we're just really like these crazy, bucking stallions all over the world. And we keep trying to take everything away from these stallions. You got to teach the stallion actually how to work and understand themselves so they can evolve into this world. And that's what ketamine and psychedelics do. So what we have now in the States, we have 3 bricks and mortars in the States. We have the retreat space in the British Virgin Islands. And then we're also working on opening a ketamine clinic down there as well, with 2 locations. So working on those different aspects, but then working with partners across the United States in order to keep expanding, because we have the solution to help with this. And I do move very, very fast. But what I tell people, the reason I move so fast is because we want to try to get it solved before it affects your kid, before it affects your family member, before it affects anybody around you, right? Because everyone that we know is dying from pain conditions, addiction, mental health. Like, we're in the biggest war that we've ever been in, and we can't see the enemy because the enemy lies within. So, working on for the bricks and mortar aspects, we do have home ketamine as well, which I know she's been a little bit controversial as of late with just, bad practitioners and such. But yeah, just constantly evolving, trying to bring research to the market with actual data analytics so we can put things on paper, we can start validating the space. If you don't believe in psychedelics yet, you will eventually, because right now it's community or it's institutions. It's going to be the merge of both, but we've got to get the data that shows what's the best for the consumer. So that's kind of where I'm at. That's kind of what I push for. I'm a very, very big advocate for people. But I'm also protective of everybody, right? So people who believe, investors who believe in me in the space, I'm still protective of them as well. And it's not easy, but it's worth it.
So psychedelics, people think about it as taking drugs and then going off into a high, and then the high's over, and then there's a low. What you're doing is you're taking, if I understand that correctly, is you're taking the good pieces of that and you're combating or targeting certain parts of the brain to help reduce inflammation you mentioned and other things to help regulate the person's ups and downs. Is that a good way of explaining it? Or can you?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can go into that more.
Okay,
So
thanks.
psychedelics, right? And this is all of them. So you want to say ketamine's going to be a psychedelic. She works in a similar fashion. MDMA, who just got turned down by the FDA, psychedelic. LSD, um, psilocybin, magic mushrooms, 5-MeO, DMT is another one. There's a lot of them out there, right? What they're doing is, like, over time, Adam, you and I create protective measures. That's the way we evolve in life. If something hurts us, our brain recognizes it and it will put up a wall. It will recognize a threat, all these different pieces. So when we react to things in life, that can either help our situation or it can start destroying our situation. And a lot of times we can't identify, like, why did I just scream? Why do I get so anxious? Why did I yell at my wife? Why am I so short-tempered with my kids? I don't want to be like this, right? So these are all things that we've learned from the past that are protective, but we don't know how to stop them because the brain doesn't understand right versus wrong, good versus bad. It's
Mhm.
all in the way it's trained. And it's trained from situations that we go through in life. The beautiful thing with psychedelics, and so I didn't mention this, I'm a certified psychedelic therapist as well. So what happens with ketamine and psilocybin, which are my 2 primaries that I'm around, when you take these substances, it allows you to sit with yourself in the present. When you are sitting with yourself in the present, you are not connected to any of these negative traits. No depression, no anxiety, no trauma, no pain, nothing exists. You are at one with yourself. So when you're sitting there in that moment, and that's kind of when you're with these psychedelics, you're sitting there in that moment, a lot of things that your brain's holding on to will come to the surface because your brain's still trying to get you to react. Because when you're sitting in the present and you're not connected to any of these negative things that typically protect you, you're vulnerable.
Right.
The brain
It's
does not
magic.
like vulnerability.
Yep.
So if it feels that you're being vulnerable, things will come to the surface that typically cause you to trigger or to react in order to protect yourself. The beautiful thing about sitting with yourself in this moment, you're not emotionally connected to what your brain's bringing up. You can analyze the data. So there may be something that comes up, from when you were in 5th grade and a teacher yelled at you and it really hurt your little 5th grade heart, right? And that would actually get you to react even when you're like 60 years old, because the brain, and this is quantum physics, the brain does not understand time. That's why we have clocks. That's why we have to take medications when we're blind to show us when the appropriate REM cycle is. The brain understands time on planes. So, and that's the way it works, even with PTSD. So people will feel like a loser, right? If they're like, I lose my mind every time something dies. It can be a goldfish. And it takes me back to when my grandfather died 40 years ago. Well, the reason it does is because the brain doesn't understand time. So the only reason it feels less is because of the coping mechanisms that you have created over time, because the brain's still not processed all of that energy that came in at one time. It still sees it as a threat. So the beautiful thing with psychedelics is when you're sitting in this space, right? You become your own Yoda. All this stuff comes up. And instead of feeling the emotion that's attached to the situation, you can analyze the emotion, because we have emotions and we have memories, and they're enmeshed in life. And it's actually up here in our frontal lobe. This is PTSD, what I'm explaining kind of sort of right now. But when you have that emotion and memory and they're enmeshed, you can't see when the memory starts and stops, and you can't see when the emotion starts and stops. But when it comes up, right, on psychedelics, they're disconnected. You can see the memory, you can see the emotion, and you can acknowledge both. So you're sitting there, right? This big, powerful, empowered person, not feeling anything at all. And you're just watching all this stuff go by. And you're sitting there and you go, well, of course I would feel that way during that time. So you acknowledge it. And when you acknowledge it, what happens is the brain takes it from your frontal lobe, which is where your short-term memory is, which is where the emotions are attached, takes it to a place in your brain called your amygdala, which helps with emotional processing, puts it into your long-term memory. When it goes into your long-term memory, emotions aren't attached to it. So you can bring up the situation and you can choose to attach the memory with it or the emotion with it, but the emotion doesn't lead the sentence. And I'll tell people, if the emotion leads, you need help. Doesn't matter what it is, right? So that's the way psychedelics, when used in appropriate context, that's the way that they work. And when you're decreasing all this brain inflammation, cerebral inflammation, right, from just stress, right? Stress creates everything nasty. When you decrease all this inflammation, you're increasing the blood flow to your brain. It's called your cerebral perfusion pressure, right? So you're opening up your little baby pipes in your brain, and all this blood flow is coming up with nutrients and oxygen. So it's allowing our brain to mature better over time instead of living in a state of inflammation and having all this damage done over time. So, what drives me crazy in the mental health space is, take this medicine, let's see if it helps. And I'm like, we're not here to suppress the symptoms. We need to do an intervention to actually solve the reason as to why we're here. Then we can look at management. So it's completely reversed in mental health as it is with anything else. Like if you break your leg, I'm not going to give you a pill to help your leg pain to stop because your leg's broken. We got to get in there and fix it. So that's what we're working on, is interventions first, high efficiency, things that work. In mental health right now, the average cost is $1.8 million over a lifespan for someone to receive mental health treatment.
Wow.
$1.8 million. You know what
Wow.
that means? We suck. That means we suck as providers, So it's like with psychedelics, we're seeing like 85% success.
Wow.
Right? With either one session or up to it's like 6 hours. It's basically 6 hours of care. You're getting like 85% success. So you're actually starting to get into where medicine actually is. One of my degrees in anesthesia, we're 99.9% effective. In psychiatry, they're about 30% effective, meaning that placebo sometimes actually is more effective. And what does that mean? Does it mean that we're dumb. We're not dumb. We're just focused on the wrong solutions, and we're too stubborn to turn our eyes and look elsewhere. So then comes me helping to be just as stubborn as the rest of them, saying you all need to just turn your head, admit failure, close that book, and let's open this one.
So I absolutely love this. This is right up my alley, and I've never done this before on the show, but I'm going to go there and ask you some more questions about this because this is fascinating for me. Today's the first day we met, but on my journey, I actually have a similar situation, how there's good, bad inside all of us, and evil, dark, or light, or whatever it is. And in the book, this is an investment book. I have cartoons, and I have two characters. There's a smart money superhero, and there's a dumb money beast. So the smart money superhero is the person that's designed, Katie, to do what you're saying, to make rational, not emotional decisions. But the dumb money beast is that Tasmanian devil type character that runs around and causes people to make emotional decisions. And what happens when you do that, especially with your money, you kind of make subpar decisions and you're all over the place, like a Tasmanian devil, just going around in circles. So the whole point of my book is to help people remove the emotion from the decision-making process. And then there's a lot more to it, but that's basically the high level. So what you're saying, and here's what fascinates me, what you're saying when people take the psychedelic from a medical standpoint, I've got emotional pain or trauma or any other negative or event that is perceived in my brain as a negative event, because the event is neutral, the perception is what determines it, right? Then, okay, great. I can't separate the emotion because my brain doesn't understand time from the event. So I'm still thinking that the event, my brain thinks it's happening right now, whether it was 20 years ago, 50 years ago, whatever the event was, PTSD, any type of traumatic event, my brain thinks it's happening right now. But with the psychedelics, it's allowed me to say, hey, listen, get into an altered state, if you will, by microdosing or whatever doses are appropriate. And then I can separate that event from the emotional trigger, the unconscious response. So in a sense, if I understand you properly, you're making the unconscious conscious. Is that correct?
I love it. Yes. So there was something that came out, and I was so happy, right? Because this is the beautiful thing, Adam. What I just said and what you just said, they align because it's science, because
Right.
there's redundant patterns, right? So I saw something on a statistic, because I've been around maybe 15,000 people with ketamine. So I see it, I'm a subject matter expert with ketamine. But what happens, right, is there was something that came out that said 5% of the decisions that you make are based on your conscious thoughts. 95% is based on your subconscious. So the way I describe that to people is your conscious is your actions, your subconscious is your reactions. So if you're making your shopping list, right, that's your conscious decisions. If you buy something quickly because you're emotionally involved, that's your reaction, right? Because you got to get it right now. But you're right. So, but the piece of it is, right, the conscious and the subconscious brain coexist, but we can't see them because they're two different players in the game. So the conscious brain loves algorithms. Step one leads to step two. Step two leads to step three. The subconscious brain is very much like a brainstorm, 360 degrees. So you and I are speaking right now. We're hearing each other, but our brain right now is taking in light, sound, wind, temperature, all these things are going on at one time. And if something triggers our subconscious, we will stop listening in a conscious analytical mindset and we will go into a reactive subconscious mode. And that's what people don't understand. And unfortunately, we allow those reactions to dictate the way that we feel about ourselves instead of being like, why did I just do that? So like an example I give to people is like, if you have high blood pressure, it doesn't make you a bad person, because it's high blood pressure, right? So it's the same thing. It's the same way with the brain. The brain makes decisions. It's like I tell people, it's like a baby narcissist in our head all the time. But it makes decisions. And if we start becoming enmeshed with those decisions and saying, instead of having some type of distance, saying, why did I do that? If instead we become that, that's when it's so hard to get the treatment that we need or the understanding that we need in order to optimize ourselves. So I'll tell people with psychedelics, like when you go into it, you don't go into it saying, this is what I need to work on. I'm like, it's great to have intentions, but when you go into a psychedelic session, you instead say, all right, brain, what are you doing? Why am I here? And if you do it that way, you're acknowledging it, but you're giving yourself grace to try to understand what are your patterns. Because if we can understand our subconscious patterns, then we can take that subconscious brain and let it become integrated with the conscious brain. That's when you optimize. That's when you become empowered in who you are and you start understanding yourself. And that's when you start like optimizing yourself in psychological evolution.
I absolutely love that. Yeah. So my world, the way that I would word what you just said is nobody buys a stock based on if they hate it. You know, they buy it based on their emotions and they justify it based on logic that it's confirmation bias where people just look for information that justifies their decision, but their decisions because they like the stock. So that's why they're going to buy it. And it happens all day long. It's not just a logical, nobody buys a house that they hate. You're going to buy a house. You like the house, some level of liking the house. It's a fixer up, whatever it is, but there's some level of emotion that the unconscious or the subconscious starts the buying or the decision, and then everything else is justified with the quote unquote logical side. Okay, I love that. Katie, next question for you. Therapy. After they do the psychedelics and they help understand all this, do you ever go into Carl Jung's like shadow work or do a kind of therapy work to help align any of this stuff? Or is it just, hey, they take the psychedelics, they become aware of it, they heal, if you will, or they learn how to differentiate between the reaction and the trigger, so they're not triggered and the reaction doesn't always happen? Or how does that work going forward?
You have a guest. So actually I have therapists that work with the company. So I understand the psychological piece, but basically what the therapists, they're all licensed masters and doctorate trained therapists. They're also trained in the psychedelic space. So more so, I explain it to people from a medical, cellular, neuroscience, data analytic piece. The therapist more so, they'll focus on like, IFS, right? Like the internal family systems. They'll do CBT work, cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT. We do have some therapists that actually even do EMDR, and they've had some really, really good success. So more so what I see with people, and I don't know what this is, Adam, maybe we can co-write a book together one day. But there's two sectors that I've noticed with people, because some people can do psychedelics and ketamine and do just fine. They have those skills. Other people, when ketamine and psychedelics take them to this neutral space, they always don't know how to navigate it, right? They don't have those critical thinking skills. Because think about it, right? When we're in like
That was my question. How do they, once you get that information, what do you do with it?
right.
Yeah.
So some people don't know. But what we do, and one thing I've noticed, because everybody's different, right? And that's one of my viewpoints with people. I'm not here to tell you what to do, which is what we do in the medical system now. I'm here to help support you with the skills that I have. What do you want? How can I help you? Because a lot of medical providers, when you come to me, I'm like, oh, well, this is what I do. Like, you're going to listen to me. I went to school for this long, and it drives me crazy. But instead, it's like, how can I help you? Right. So when some people come in, they may not always know. They're like, I don't know. I'm relying on you. I'm like, okay, if you're relying on me, then typically what I would say, if people are comfortable, we will do ketamine or psychedelics and have therapists actually sit with you during the session. Some people like that. Other people like prep. They call it prep. So they'll actually meet with a therapist prior to, because in that altered mindset, they would feel safer with, kind of be in that space by themselves. And, but there's always people around should anybody need anything. But then there's also called integration therapy. So after the session takes place, because our subconscious is amazing.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
It's so weird, but it's amazing. But something I'm like, you never know, right? And here's an example that I give Adam to people to try to describe it. Say you go into a grocery store and you see a tomato, and all of a sudden, this tomato makes you want to cry, or it makes you feel panicky or something. And so consciously, we're going to be like, well, I'm losing my mind because I'm looking at a tomato in a grocery store and I'm getting ready to have a panic attack. Or my medications aren't working. I need to get on more medications. Or I need to get back to therapy. Or maybe I'm having a midlife crisis, right? So these are all of our conscious, normal things that we do. The subconscious is so stupid, simple, strong, right? When you saw that tomato, the subconscious may see red, circle, green. And it may have taken you back to when you were in a car wreck and you were 16 years old and you were sitting at a red light. And that was when that red light turned green and then you got hit. So your brain saw that tomato as a threat because it felt vulnerable. And that's what I'll tell people a lot. I love the term vulnerability. I hate the way it's used online. because everybody says, oh, you got to be vulnerable to heal, you know, and it sounds so beautiful and sexy, and it's not. Vulnerability, and this is another cool thing with psychedelics, you're like, huh, I feel vulnerable right now. So you have a feeling and you can put words on it. But I tell people vulnerability is when I take you to the Congo and I drop you off in the middle of the Congo. You have no money, no friends, no shelter. You are then vulnerable. You are then in a state of being out of control. Our brain likes balance, and the balance isn't always good, but it will match those energies, right? So if you're there and you're in this vulnerable state of being out of control, your brain's going to match that polarity with being over controlled, right? So that's a piece, is like when you become vulnerable with psychedelics, if you can identify, it's okay. You can actually guide yourself. If you can't identify it, then we go into this overreactive mode to where we got to get control again, you know. And so yeah, so it's if people do the right work before going into psychedelics and do the right care afterwards to integrate and to grow, it's going to be beautiful. But what's happening right now is everyone knows psychedelics, right? I've been to school for, I don't know, 11 years or so. I've got a master's degree, postmaster's degree, and 4 licenses, I guess now. But I'll go to certain conferences and I will not tell people that I'm in Western medicine. Absolutely not. Because as soon as I say that, I am automatically get out. We don't like you. I know what I'm doing.
Right.
And it's interesting because this is, where we are decriminalizing psychedelics, which that's great, whatever, but it also scares me to death because you're decriminalizing it just the same as you're decriminalizing cannabis. But what are you doing? You're not giving them a dose. You're not giving them a range. You're not giving them a frequency. You're not giving them anything because you're not allowing providers to feel comfortable to enter the space because we still can't prescribe it, and that's what it's frustrating, right? Because there's a lot of providers who will out of sight, out of mind. They won't address it. So here's our community saying, I'm struggling. I know this works. Let me get into the space and let me just start doing it on my own. And then, everybody becomes a spiritual narcissist and think that they're better than, all these trained providers. So that's kind of the middle of the storm where I'm at right now, is trying to hear the right side, trying to hear the left side, trying to integrate everybody because I know we can make it work. And but yeah, it's a heck of a ride for sure.
Okay, I love it. Final question on this, and then we'll move forward because I could talk to you for hours, probably days, weeks, and months about this subject. What do you think after they take the psychedelic, after they're quote unquote diagnose it, and they can realize a difference between the trigger and the response? How does the healing process unfold? How do people heal? Would be I guess, the question.
They feel it, right? That's the cool thing, right? They'll do psychedelics, they'll do ketamine, and they feel like they can breathe. They feel like life's not as heavy. One of the skill sets that we don't have in this life, which I'm actually working on, hopefully there is a paper, a pretty good sized paper coming out on a scale that I actually created, that looks at risk mitigation. Because right now we're not looking at any risk mitigation. The only risk mitigation we have is when you want to kill yourself, call 911, and that's not risk mitigation. So what we have to learn, right, is we have to learn when it's time to go in for a checkup. When I'll tell people, you got your white zone, your light gray, your dark gray, your black zone. When you came to me, you were in the black zone. Now you feel like you're in the white zone. But here's the thing. You've been to the black zone before. It's going to be easier to slip into the black zone without you knowing. So you've got to try to find strategic ways to help yourself stay well, not sick. And that's the piece, right? So you'll see, like, there's normal and then there's sick, which is what we do in societies. We treat sickness. But the normal, right, is mundane. We don't want a normal lifestyle. We want to be well in this life. So I tell people, like, when you start feeling like you're getting to that mundane aspect, that's when, you want to have intervention. Because some people, Adam, can do psychedelics one time their whole life and they're fine.
Yep.
It puts them on the track where they want to go. But nobody has taught us the skills that we need in order to quantize or to measure our sense of growth, right? And so those are all things, like, I do have an education platform that should go live soon, that helps people to start trying to measure this. Because one example I like to give people is, who taught you to be peaceful and calm? Nobody.
Nobody, exactly.
Yeah.
Nobody.
You know,
Who's
we just
telling you to be
expect it.
happy? You can't go even
Right.
further.
Yeah. We
Yeah,
just
nobody.
expect peace and calm comes naturally,
Right.
and it doesn't. And we look at people who are peaceful and calm as like either like not having a hard life. No, it's a skill that they've taught themselves, and peaceful and calmness only exists in the present. It doesn't exist in the past, which is where depression and trauma exist, and it doesn't exist in the future, which is where anxieties and irritation and rages exist. Peace and calm is in the present. So we can get this in our school systems, starting in kindergarten, how to teach these little guys to be peaceful and calm, not when they're reacting over, negatively in life, but just naturally. Like, how do you learn to live in the present moment? It's something so simple that we went from like level 0 to like level 25. And we didn't build level 1 through 24 at all. So it's if we could teach these little basic skills, we could solve a crisis. But instead, we want to like put them on more meds and keep taking things away. Including taking away guns, including taking away inpatient psych units. Like the whole country dropped all those things down, and then we put people on the streets, and we're like, oh, I don't know why crime's up. You're putting people who don't know how to live life back in the streets, and it's like, I don't know, we can see these cycles, right? The
Yeah.
definition of insanity.
Yeah, no, 100% doing the same thing, expecting different results. So, Katie, I guess this is a good segue to my next question about risk management. How do you handle risk, and what are some mistakes you see people make with respect to risk management?
um with this company in particular, right, I look at everything because you want to talk about trailblazing. This is ultimate trailblazing. This is going against the biggest sector in the world, which is healthcare, right? And not only that, but it's medical. So I have medical providers and I have behavioral providers. They're two completely different sectors. So from a risk management standpoint, me personally, every decision that I make within this company, I tell people, I'm like, it's like if I went to court, judge does not know me, Adam from Eve.
Right.
I come in and it's like, explain your case. Why'd you do this? So I have that viewpoint on every clinic we open, every provider we work with, how the DEA responds, because in healthcare, you've got the DEA, EPA, FDA, you've got OSHA, you have state regulations, you have federal regulations, right? And so many people, especially in the psychedelic space, they're like, oh, the FDA, they're stupid. They don't know what they're doing, And then everybody watched MDMA, unfortunately, get eaten by the FDA. I think the FDA did gain some respect then, but it's the right side thinking they know everything. It's the left side thinking they know everything. It's me believing that either side can take me down at any moment.
Right.
So it's being versatile. So from the risk management aspect, it's constantly analyzing the system. It's also making sure that you're infiltrating the system. So, I had my anesthesia degree. I'm a professional drug dealer. That's what anesthesia providers are, right? But where they said, well, you don't have your psychiatry degree. So with me personally, I was like, okay, I can see that. So if they say it can't be anesthesia providers giving ketamine, it's only going to be psychiatrists. That's why I went back and got my additional degree. So I constantly think about how's the political system going to pigeonhole this, and how do I counteract that and be preemptive with that counteraction. So that's so yeah, so with this company, she's there she had, it's everything. We have therapists, we have athletes, we have veterans, we have researchers, we have trauma surgeons, heart surgeons, brain surgeons with this company, right? Because there's so many different pieces. But if I think, like, I played Division I sports in college, and I look at this constantly as a team. And it's like, are they optimizing? How are we going to win the season? Are they not going to make it on the team? It's time for them to go. So it's constantly doing that. But I think that's the only way you can do risk analysis with this, and then also be willing, right? I've had to go down to the state a few times because I've had providers want to close my clinic. I've not been down there in a couple of years. They've slowed down a little bit, but it's all of those personalities and egos that you're fighting, and you've got to be willing to fight any of those egos, especially if you believe in the power of the mission, which I solely do.
I love that. How about timeless lessons that you've learned that you'd like to share with the audience?
The more confident you are in life, the more crow you're going to eat in life. I think that helps with the wisdom aspects too. I think a big thing that I've learned with this is learning how to sprint but while still giving yourself grace to allow yourself the perseverance that you need. So, a lot of people will say you're doing too much, or you've got too many things going on at one time. There's no way you can do this. And you can do all those things at one time, but you got to have the ability to sprint when you need to, and then also have the endurance to continue to go. Because I see a lot of CEOs, they will go and they'll go very, very hard. And then all of a sudden they're out, right? They're out of fumes. They're out of power. So you've got to be able to quantize it. So I think one of the things, with me specifically is I look at this company now as my new sport, because it's like there's a preseason, there's an in season, there's a postseason, but the season never ends, and if it helps me to kind of look at it that way, that gives me that long, the long play, because this is something that will change the world. And it's not only going to change it for me and you, it's going to change it for children, adolescents, all the lifespans. We just have to do it the right way.
I love it. Think of it, I always tell people it's an infinite game. You're playing a game, but it's an infinite game. It just never ends. So make sure you're prepared for the marathon type of thing, because most people want to stop, but this just keeps going. Business, markets, all that fun stuff. All right, next question for you. CEO, leadership. What's some lessons you've learned about leadership? What makes a great leader?
Oh gosh. I'm still learning those, right? What makes a great leader? I think sorry, I have Great Danes, if you can tell. What makes a great leader, I think, is having the ability to listen, but also having the confidence to make the decisions that that are needed. And because I've learned, you can't give people too many opinions sometimes in the space. Otherwise, they want to try to challenge your leadership, even though they can't see it. So me personally, I'm still learning, right? Like my leadership abilities, and that balance, because I can go and I can leave people in the background, but sometimes you need to, right? So, leadership is very, very lonely sometimes.
Yeah,
You
we were
have
just
to have
yeah.
what?
No, we were just talking about that before we started, how it's lonely at the top, but yeah, by all means.
Right. It's
Yeah.
it's lonely. You got to be willing to sacrifice. You've got to be willing to commit. I mean, my husband, my ex-husband, great person, chief medical officer of this company. He's a heart surgeon, but he wanted a wife, and he said, I either need you to go back to the OR, or I need you to, continue with the company, but you need to decide. And I did make that decision, right? I made the decision that it was better for us not to be married, in order for me to continue to go for the company. So, leadership takes such significant sacrifices that
Mhm.
no one will ever know.
Mhm.
And if you're a good leader, they shouldn't know it, because you're not here to whine and complain and to get their sympathy. You're here to continue to evolve to the next level that you're intended to go to. So, that's my biggest piece. I think, me as a leader, nobody understands all the darkness that you go through as a leader when you're trying to do this. So people that are leaders have my, undevoted respect, because I get it, and not a lot of people can do that.
Yeah, it's very heavy. So next question for you, it's a good segue. How do you handle adversity, and what are some obstacles that you've had to overcome that you'd like to share with us, please?
Well, that's going to be my series of books. No,
Fair
just
enough.
kidding.
We'll have a whole TV show about it.
Adversity.
Yeah.
Gosh, I mean, Adam, that's a really good question. Because there's been so many obstacles, right? Because not only am I a provider and I'm ethically aligned, right, to protect these people that trust me, but not only do I protect the patients, but I also protect the providers. I also protect, the investors, right? So you're constantly protecting all these different pieces, but then everybody wants to tell you the way that you're intended to be doing it from their perspective. So, how overcoming that, I've had to learn how to hear people, um, and see the impressions and the interpretations that they have, and then to build the system based on how I need to build it, because I'm the one in the fire. And so the adversity piece, yeah, it's really hard, because you're advocating for people with mental health. This is anybody. I mean, we've had snipers, we've had therapists, we've had, moms that have lost children, right? So, So that adversity, it's going to take a second. But you know, the one piece too, right, is, and this is again, this is why I run so fast, and this is why we're currently working on a model to help protect this space a little bit more, is there's also providers who get in the space like the Matthew Perry providers,
Hmm.
right? So if you read that story,
Yeah.
that was a situation of abuse. That was financial abuse. These people who are ethically aligned to protect him took advantage of him. And this happens in the mental health sector. Oh my gosh. I was blown away how often this happens in the mental health sector. But it also happens in the psychedelic sector. You get the wrong people in, you give them the power of the dollar, you give them power. Power. People love power. And you give them that, and they will destroy the people around them that became so vulnerable and willing to trust them. So I had this like, I don't know if people believe in reincarnation. I don't know what I was previously, but there's like people. I had an anesthesiologist at the hospital one time. He said, "Why do you always walk into the fires when there's something going on?" I'm like, I don't know. Like I'm drawn to it, right? So it like eats at my soul if I see injustice, you know. So I think, you know, like I'm in this space to address the adversities of it, and to tackle them one on one, you know, to just to try to continue to evolve. Because, you know, like I said, like if investors get in this space and they do it correctly, they're going to become very wealthy. But you've got to do it with the right people, and you've got to truly understand the space. Because me, yeah, I've been fooled several times with, you know, certain sectors, you know, and working on these different pieces. But you just have to have the ability to get up and take the punches and roll with them and keep going.
I love it, Katie. So the last question for you today. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely fantastic. What's the best piece of advice you'd like to give the audience or your 30-year-old self?
Ooh. Advice for the audience. There's hope. There's hope for tomorrow, right? This is the beautiful thing that makes me so hopeful, is we're actually seeing the one organ that we didn't know and we've never known, which is the brain. We're actually going to see it on a level that makes sense. So is mental health outside of your control? No, it's not. There's a lot more things that we can be doing to actually help empower us. So that's what I would tell the everyday audience. If you feel stress, if you feel all these different things, if you're having, you know, negative thoughts about the future, there is so much hope, and there are so many good warriors in this space from all different levels, you know. So we're at a time right now of this awesome, awesome transition in life, and it's going to go down in the books of history for a long, long time. And we're building it right now. And some of these conversations that I'm on, everybody would get so excited about it because we have the answers. We're just building the platforms now, right? Initially, we didn't have the answers.
I
Uh,
absolutely love it. So you had earlier, did you want to say something else?
well, I was going to say, to my 30-year-old self, I
Yes,
would say, keep going.
I love it.
Don't quit.
Don't quit. Keep going. So, Katie, earlier you had mentioned something about AI, and that brought up was my last question, but did you want to speak about AI or no?
I would love to.
Okay, please.
Yes,
Yeah.
AI. So people are scared to death of AI, for the most part. But do I think AI is going to help solve the mental health crisis? I absolutely do. So what they're seeing now, right, with AI is allowing us to have common presentations, you know, common algorithms, and we're able to actually go in and calibrate these things, right? So it's much like, say I draw your blood, and you know, it's like, no, I don't trust that machine to count my red blood cells. Katie's going to count every one of them. No, we're going to build a machine that actually counts, and it's more specific, right, with this. So yeah, so our research and development team, Salma Therapeutics, they are neuropsychiatry AI. A lot of those guys have worked with, you know, very high sector, all the highest sector pretty much companies in the world, including like the MIT's innovation centers for AI. Like we're working with them, and they are Clydesdales, and I love them. And they have helped to validate. There's going to be a lot of really cool papers coming out, with our company working with Sama as a research. But yeah, so they've created me into an AI bot. And this is one cool thing, Adam, is the FDA has never approved anything AI.
Wow.
The way we've created the bot
That's
is that
huge.
she can be aligned to where we can continue down the path of the FDA, and hopefully to get her approved as an FDA device. So yeah, it's one of those things like people are trusting AI more, right? Because when you say something to me, I don't pause. I don't like give you a furrowed brow. Like I'm sitting there and I'm empathetically listening to you. So when I say AI, I'm not meaning a chat GPT. I'm meaning it is me moving my arms and talking to you and having my same expressions and my voice, right? It's an avatar. And she's able to read your facial expressions and the speed of your speech to measure stress on both sides, right? And then it gives us a summation of that report. So 24 hours a day, right? At 2 a.m., when people are thinking about killing themselves, they don't have anybody to call, so they're going to call 911. They can do a consult with the bot, and it can show them on the risk mitigation scale that I created, it can show them what risk they are right now. And then the next day, right? That's just one piece. We're not judging them. I'm not there to restrain anybody. I'm not there to take away their weapons. It's like, oh, you're at high risk right now. Somebody will be in touch in the morning to talk to you. So it's given people that piece of hope. But the beautiful thing about the bot is she's in like, oh gosh, I don't want to, I'll say low, I'll be conservative. But she's like in 45 languages as well. So she's going to be able to go across the entire world with this risk mitigation scale that I did, which is 5 questions and it connects 5 diagnoses. But she's going to be able to do this scale across all cultures, across all country borders, right? Because the crisis that we have, it's not siloed, it's everywhere. But the one thing it does have in common is the brain. So that's what we're working on. So yeah, lots of fun stuff for AI.
I absolutely love it. Well, Katie, thank you so much for taking the time to speak today, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Well, thank you, Adam. I'm glad to be here.